In progress.
All right, sextortionists are increasingly targeting young men for money. The outcome can be deadly. Not can be, it is deadly. It looks like it's the young man's mother and her son. Pauline Stewart holds a portrait of her son, Ryan Last, who died by suicide in February after extortionists threatened to post compromising pictures of him on the internet. And of course, they're finding out that young guys are a great target. Internet blackmailers are increasingly duping young men and boys into sending them explicitly content online by posing as young girls on social media platforms from Facebook and Instagram, then extorting them in a scheme known as sextortion. And dozens of these cases have ended victims taking their lives. And the sign of how serious the problem is becoming, the FBI field office in Los Angeles released a warning last month aimed directly at the parents of young men caught in the crosshairs of these cyber criminals who often operate in foreign countries. Yes, you know, the social media is a great conduit. You can commit crimes from the safety of your home. The FBI is receiving an increasing number of reports of adults posing as young girls, coercing young boys through social media to produce sexual images and videos and extorting them for money with them. Dozens of boys have reported being victims of a sextortion, mostly for money, although others were reportedly sextorted for additional images. Yes, I suspect there were young women turned on by these young guys, and they want more of it. One of those victims was 17-year-old Ryan Last, who lived near San Jose, California. Last died by suicide after the extortionist threatened to post compromised images on the internet, was demanding more and more money from the team, his mother, Pauline Stewart, said. This makes me question whether what they were really after was the money but his death, because everyone knows boys are penniless. So where would he get that money? Either these criminals are just so psychopathic they don't realize there's a limit, or they simply wanted him to kill himself and the money was just an extra on top of it. They wouldn't give up, and he felt he had no choice but do it to protect his family. He loved us so much that he wanted to protect us from the mistake he made. The local police forces also report seeing a rise in cases in which blackmailers focus on young men. Yes, thank you finally for admitting that. And the reason is they're better targets. Let's face it, they're better targets than girls. Young men are desperate for female partnership. There are desperate grown men getting rinsed on dating sites. You think young teenage boys aren't better targets again? Of course, if you look at the news, the majority, or I should say the major news outlets tend to like to focus on some young girl who was victim of the crime. So that's how it works, you know it. 20, 30 years ago, predators would have to go to a playground, a park to find young victims. Now there's an entire virtual world out there for them to get into and pick their victims that way. Yes. In Utah, the detective sergeant, John Pierce, at the David County's Sheriff's Office said he had investigated dozens of sextortion cases. And at least 6 instances, someone committed suicide. Nationwide, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these cases. There are many also not being reported, of course. If I was a young guy who got that, I wouldn't be reporting it either. Guys are the perfect, targets for this. Because let's face it, they're desperate, and they know their victimhood doesn't garner any sympathy. So that's why they're more likely to take their lives over this. One of these cases he was that Tevin Tobler, a 16-year-old from Utah who died by suicide in 2017. His parents recently revealed that their son, an honor student, champion high school wrestler, was also an active member of the Church of, well, who cares what church he was on, had been targeted by blackmail from the Ivory Coast. Wow. It was Pierce who made the connection after going through Tobler's cell phone records. He discovered Tina had been hounded for money by someone who had texted him for more than 1,000 times, in some cases frequently as every 30 seconds. Yeah, so the Ivory Coast from a guy from Utah. Yeah, young guys are desperate. They're obviously not getting it from any Utah girls. So they're just going for anything that's out there for them. In Tavan's case, he could not confirm the original contact platform. In most other cases, it's been Facebook or Instagram. They get coerced towards Google. Tobler's mother, Tara Tobler, told the Desert News that the blackmailer had actually urged her son to take his own life after taking his last dime. There you go. I was right then. The money is probably secondary. They urged him to take his own life. He's probably thinking, yeah, that way we won't get in trouble. But also, I think there's just a desire to see young men suffer and die. Why boys and why now? I can answer the first part, because boys are great targets. They're very vulnerable. Society does not care about them. They don't have a feeling that they can go and shout out that they've been victimized and get any sympathy. In previous years, the typical victim of this type of crime was young girls, but there's been a shift towards boys recently. Yeah, I just explained why. John Sheehan of the National Center of Missing Exploitation said, adding that he's seen an explosion of these cases in the past 6 months. Yeah, the criminals are getting smart. They realize who's a good mark. The girls have too much sympathy and there's too much work to get them to do stuff by comparison. It's rare to talk about or hear about sexual exploitation of boys. Yeah, of course. Like I just said, these young guys know they don't have any sympathy coming towards them. They're going to have mocking and ridicule. That's what's going to happen. In reality, boys are equally vulnerable to these crimes. No, in reality, they are more vulnerable. And more and often they're being enticed to create sexually explicit content. Boys are easier targets. Yeah, so of course. So they're more vulnerable, like I just said, because they are easier to coerce and exchange intimate photographs. They're less likely to tell anybody what happened to them out of shame. Exactly. So why are you trying to make this equal? It's not. Come on. It was that pressure and shame that Stewart said was the reason she lost her son. Exactly. It happened during the 8-hour period. There were no signs. He believed he was taking to a young woman. Next thing, the criminals demanding $5,000 from him. Where do these criminals think he's going to get the money? He's a teenager. Shane, terrified, lacerated his college fund to pay off the blackmailers, said his mother. There you go. I guess that answers my question. As soon as he paid them some of that, they put pressure on him to send more. And it was too much for him to take. There you go, because he knew he was screwed. Also, he had to do the shame of saying he actually gave in and paid them. That's when last a senior was planning to attend Washington University in the fall, killed himself. There you go. I think it's repeating itself. Let's see, who are the sextortionists? Let's see, they were being targeted by a sophisticated criminal group operating overseas. It's definitely a criminal enterprise involving organizations located in countries which we don't have extradition treaties. Yes, it's too sophisticated to be an individual operation. These countries include Nigeria, India, and especially the Ivory Coast, which has long been a center of cybercrime, where the blackmailer is known as brateurs, according to the law enforcement and published reports. Yes. 2014, a former brateur told the BBC News how he operated. You find yourself a man or woman who's looking for love, then you start chatting and exchange photos. Once that happens, the brateur imposes what he calls the tax and starts draining the victim's wallet dry. Wow. So I'll see if there's anything more to be said here. Okay, you can read the rest for yourself, because talking, even though this is a sophisticated group, like they say online, and it probably involves a lot of men, I'm going to push the fact that young men are the more vulnerable targets. They're because of two reasons. One, they don't get their sexual needs met in any way. And two, uh, their victimhood is going to be used to mock them and shame them in a way that young girls don't. And as you can see by the major news outlets, they like to focus on girls. So that's what I'm letting you guys know. And as you can see, notice these, what is that word? Like the sex trade or sex trafficking is only used to demonize men. It's always used, and it's often used for like grown women, right? Who give themselves up willingly and know what's going on. But that term is missing when young guys are getting zapped. So just think about that too. We'll end it here.